Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program produced and funded by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Ralph Eisler.
And I'm John Clark. We want you to know that if you don't believe in gods, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
Now, this is a call-in show. However, we only have one phone line. So if you can't get through, we invite you to tweet them to us at FFTVKNOX. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
Whoops. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's will be again at the Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30 p.m. Just look for the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. You're free to come and hang out and share your thoughts and experiences with us. Just please don't proselytize. Please don't, troll on our members. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, well, the Rationalists of East Tennessee has several regular monthly meetings. First and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with a lively roundtable discussion. The book club meets on the second Sunday, and the reflections group gets together for a potluck lunch on the fourth Sunday. Visit our websites for additional details, including times and locations. But before we discuss any other points, let's look at some items in the news. First item that kind of caught my eye this week was the proportion of Australians who identify as Christian is falling fast. It's down over 8 points in the last 2 years. That is 8 percentage points. And if the current trend was to continue, Christians will soon be the minority in Australia. The latest research from Roy Morgan shows. This goes along also with some polls that have come from Great Britain that shows the number of people who declare themselves Christians and not believers is about equal right now. Some other polls show Christians are still ahead, though. In the late 2011 in Australia, Christians outnumbered the non-religious by more than 2 to 1. That is 60.9% of Australians identifying as Christians compared with 29.2% who said they had no religious affiliation. But in the latest quarter, October to December, 52.6% of Australians said they were Christian, 37% had no religion. If the recent trend continues, then fewer Australians may be self-identifying as Christians by next year. This is a real turnabout, I think, in the English-speaking world. Okay, Roy Morgan, the research industry communications director, Norman Morris, said the results that the decline in the proportion of Australians who say they're Christian, coupled with a similarly sized increased number who tell us have no religion, could reflect a growing level of genuine atheism or agnosticism, or instead simply a shift away from identifying with organized Christianity. Morris said, likely it is a combination of both.
In what's being heralded as a secular triumph, the UK government has banned the teaching of creationism as science in all existing and future academies and free schools. The new clauses, which arrived with very little fanfare last week, state that the requirement for every academy and free school to provide a broad and balanced curriculum in any case prevents the teaching of creationism as evidence-based theory in any academy or free school. And by creationism, what they mean is any doctrine or theory which holds that natural biological processes cannot account for the history, diversity, and complexity of life on Earth, and therefore rejects the scientific theory of evolution. The parties acknowledge that creationism, in this sense, is rejected by most mainstream churches and religious traditions, including the major providers of state-funded schools, such as the Anglican Catholic churches, as well as the scientific community. It does not accord with the scientific consensus or the very large body of established scientific evidence, nor does it accurately and consistently employ the scientific method, and as such, it should not be presented to pupils at the academy as a scientific theory. And that is...
That's a big breakthrough, I think. A little different in this country where we have politicians, mostly at the state level, always pounding the doors to try to get creationism taught alongside evolution or in place of evolution in the public school system.
It's in a political argument now. It's ridiculous. And that language used there is not. That's written from purely, should this be in a science classroom as a scientific theory?
Yes.
And I mean, that's straight and to the point.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of what they've done. That's amazing. We can't separate the two. We've got to have this conversation playing around the word theory. You know, it's just a theory. And it gets inserted as if that counts.
Yeah, that's even, I think one of our callers last week tried to make that point, but we disparaged him from that.
Right, exactly.
That creationists are people of religion generally don't really understand what theory means in the scientific sense.
Well, certainly the creationists, that's it. When you repeat that word in that context, you're letting me know that you don't know what that word means.
Yeah, it's like it's like the theory of gravity. Is that just a supposition that we make? Maybe if we denied took the opposite view that it's only a theory.
Let me tell you something I heard.
It would be bound to the earth.
This is one I heard recently. They go, okay, gravity's a law, and then I said, no, gravity's a theory. The fact that matter attracts matter. You might look at that as a law, but it's still a theory, still something we're learning to understand. And so under the same reasoning, evolution would be a theory, a very powerful tool of science. Right?
Yes, well, the theories are based on experimental observation, verification, hypothesizing, testing those hypotheses, and finally putting it together in a narrative that you call a theory. That is an overall encompassing description of that particular area of science.
Well, we're going to get right into that for the most part here. You can see today's topic, Defending Cosmos. We're talking about Cosmos, a Space-Time Odyssey, a recent show that just aired in its last episode, 13th episode. And obviously, this is going to be the target of anyone who is upset by science, which might bother their religious beliefs, which might bother just their way of life in general. Yeah. And just like Carl Sagan came straight into it, Neil deGrasse Tyson did the same thing, and he's making a strong stand for science. We're going to look at creationism as an idea, but an old idea that just hasn't brought us any as Nye would say, any predictive value.
Yeah. Well, what the creationists are counting on is the veracity of the Bible stories. I mean,
right.
And these are mythologies that were handed down from Bronze Age goat herders, as I'm fond of saying, and eventually got put down in writing and written up, and then collected into a book, which was then subsequently included in the volume we call the Bible, arbitrarily chosen.
Yeah.
There, and so, the creationism is, I think, just latched onto by people who can't come to deal with modernity, really.
Especially what strikes importance to me is when you said. Stories that just over time, they're stories and they're written down and then become part of a religious text. I'm going to be sampling a lot of my criticisms of Cosmos, or a lot of criticisms of Cosmos, from Answers in Genesis, which is a website, an organization which, thinks all the answers are right there in Genesis, or rather the Bible. And when they would respond to such a claim, they would say, God done it. And that really is about the extent of it. Now, they might go into detail about some physical mechanism or some scientific understanding to a degree, but then they just God done it.
As Tyson has this quote, which I kind of like, although it may be a little offensive to some people. he says God is never receding pocket of scientific ignorance.
Right.
And if you think back over history, that's exactly what happened. I mean, for instance, in the Middle Ages, when the Black Plague was ravaging Europe, it was God's punishment, on the people for not being religious enough, etc. But of course, as time went on, science discovered what causes disease, and we understand that it's not God's punishment. It's caused by a nasty little bacterium that is carried around on the fleas that infest rats.
Yeah. Furthermore, not just it wasn't caused by God. We just know that much. And then furthermore, when it comes to fixing the problem, now we have medication, but we also have things like quarantining the area of the towns and whatnot, which they participated in.
Right.
And very effective measures. Don't remember prayer being listed as one of the effective measures at that time.
I don't think it worked very well, considering the number of people who died.
Well, let's get to Cosmos here, and I want to talk about Episode 1, Standing Up in the Milky Way. So this episode was introduced by Barack Obama, President Obama, and that caused enough of a stir, at least, to immediately incite some rage and criticism.
Yeah, unfortunately, I missed that, so I'll have to listen to you tell me about it.
Well, rather than tell you that much about it, I mean, the focus was that he was present at all. Turning it into a political matter.
Yeah,
this is a president, this is a leader simply going, this is a good idea. And that's a political endorsement of sorts, but the criticism is that, here comes the left-leaning wash over all of our right-leaning ideas. I do think the right allies itself with some poorly scientific ideas on occasion.
Yes.
But
it's true. I mean, the Republican Party is supported, I won't say many, but to a large extent, their core group is fundamentalist Christians.
Right.
And
voters, yes.
Yeah, and I've even gone so far as to call them the Christo-Republican Party, because I think that's the devolution of where they've gone.
Well, there are very few Republicans I can think of that I know personally. I mean, Johannes, who's hosted the show sometimes, it's just a leader endorsing a show to him. It wouldn't be that much of a party line issue. And I would think someone like him, I'd have to ask him sometime, but it's going to annoy you when people are upset just simply for the political endorsement by someone, just someone of the party, I mean. And that is the subject of the ridicule of the show. And so this is the show not even really getting a foot off. It's just, hey, I'm glad we're not doing another version of Wife Swap or something.
It was an endorsement of the program of the science.
Right.
Right? I mean,
yes.
Since Carl Sagan did the original version, we've had this hiatus, this gap. We haven't had anything quite like this on television. And I think it was novel. And so far as I can tell from the reviews and people who read it, it was pretty successful.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the type of thing we need to bring young people towards science and make them realize, how great it is and how mind-boggling the universe is, and exactly how stimulating it is for the mind, for a person to get in and do that.
And that's exactly what was going for in the original Cosmos. Anne Duran, also for, like, if you've seen Cosmos on Hulu, it's available on Hulu, and you watch the first episode, they now insert a short video segment of her into the show. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. But it's identical to what Obama's saying. It was incidental that he's the president. I mean, not but incidental regarding who puts it there. It needs to be a leader and someone who's trying to put forth a good idea of the future. But she mentions we're coming out of the Cold War. We're coming out of all these crises. One in which put the whole world at risk of nuclear annihilation, and we're coming out of this, and they wanted to open up the gates for knowledge again and get us back to science and understanding the world for noble reasons.
Yeah, well, you know, you read in the paper frequently, and we have it right here in Tennessee, the push to develop STEM academies, that is academies that are focused on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that's a big push in the country to try to get those going, because people say we don't have enough young students coming along in those disciplines, okay? But on the other hand, we have this pull back of people say, well, you can teach them science, but don't teach them too much. Don't teach them whatever conflicts with our religious views. And so that's a struggle that's going on in this country. I don't know how it will come out.
Yeah, one of the strangest thing to me in high school, and this, bear in mind, in high school, I'm a Christian, but one of the strangest things was 4 years of English composition. What for? I was only required to have 3 years, or 3 semesters, I guess, of math.
Yeah.
And that stopped. I mean, I could stop that at like, I don't know what the classes were called at the time because I didn't take them, but I was, regarding the subjects, math was my strong point. So I went all the way to calculus in high school. So I didn't just take 4 semesters. I took 8. I did every semester I was in a math class.
Right.
And what was strange to me was that I was required 4 of English comp and 3 of math, and I was like, this is so weird, because it's not that hard. Personally, English composition, I never had an issue with it.
Yeah,
but
well,
anyways.
that's different. That's
I don't want to step on Ben and Rachel and any of my pro-reading. I'm a pro-reading person. Can I do some reading right now? So Tyson really, he brings up the importance of Sagan's cosmos, and he describes the ship of the imagination that we're going to tour the universe with, and in fact the microverse, we're going to get down into our cells and beyond. Right. And once I can get past these criticisms like Barack Obama opening the credits or the series, and one thing that we use is a historical picture. What was going on when people were trying to describe the universe, these early scientists, and we're really at the end of natural philosophy, right? Right before science. And one of the characters he uses is Giordano Bruno. And one of the criticisms was that we got the history wrong somehow, that he wasn't a rebel, that he was not a heretic. And Tyson had pointed out that these ideas, as a mystic, he was a mystic, kind of giving a different view of the universe and a different view of how to question religion. At the time, this is, no, don't do it. Don't question these things. But he supported a view that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, or the solar system, and posed lots of questions, but he did it in really mystical ways because he was reading the banned books of the Catholic Church, which he got in trouble for. And so here comes the criticism saying, oh, well, no, he wasn't a heretic. It was other reasons, because he had not been a good Catholic or not been a good, well, at the time, that's the definition of heresy, was going against the norm.
Okay, I think we have a call.
But we do have a call. Let's jump straight to
it. Take that.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
Hi, it's Charles from Central Illinois.
Oh, hey, Charles.
Yeah, well, today's topic is defending cosmonauts. I'm taking.
Yeah, we're going to
the show.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to try our hand at some of the criticisms come our way.
I've seen a couple of the criticisms. Mostly it seems to be the people that want to get up there and preach their religious doctrine instead of addressing the issue.
Right. I think another way that they might say it would be that Cosmos isn't giving them their views, their equal time, their religious views, time on a science show.
Yeah. And therefore they believe they have the right to sit up there and preach at the on subjects that have nothing to do with what the show is about.
Yeah, their complaint to a large extent was exactly that they thought that they should be given equal time. They can't make a good case for being given equal time any more than say somebody from any other religion could make a case for being given equal time, because we're talking about science here now. We're not talking about religious beliefs.
Right. And also, you know, there is a little bit of time given to them, and that time given to them on the show is the Catholic Church was in power, and it said that was heresy, and it caused a lot of problems. It impeded progress. Now, if I were still religious right now, that would bother me to hear. And I, by all means, I think it should. I think that should bother you. But I don't know what equal time, Charles, maybe you've heard, but I don't know what other equal time they want on the show. I mean,
they want, from what I've heard, is that they're not allowed to get up there and, you know, state their case for their religious beliefs.
Right.
And why they think that religious belief is true.
Right.
Which is the same, you know, same thing they do every time they call into your show or any other shows.
Yes.
Okay. We accept it because the Bible says the Bible is the Word of God, and the Word of God says it, and therefore it's true. And like Bill and I said on the last question was, what would change your mind? Is evidence, and they don't want to give evidence. They just want to pontificate.
Yeah, well, Ken, that was a student who asked that question, you know, during the question period, and that's what Bill Nye said. What he would need to change his mind is evidence. And when they asked to Ken Ham, the guy who is behind Answers in Genesis, he said nothing. Nothing would change his mind.
Yeah. He digressed slightly, and I can't remember exactly what he was talking. It didn't matter. It wasn't really a big deal. But then he's just like, there is nothing that God would be. Oh, my religion encompasses. If I were to say anything, if you had like a Venn diagram way of showing it, he wants to say, my God encompasses all of science and does not contradict in any way. And so he really doesn't want to answer that question because he doesn't think that anything would. And so the answer is no, just like you're saying. Nothing would change my mind. But he's trying to answer it as if saying, but nothing should because I'm right.
Well,
yeah.
You see what I mean? It's
and there's the difference between Cosmos and Bill Nye and the scientific community, and many of them who are in fact religious or have religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And people
That's
like
a good point.
the Ken Ham and the young Earth creationists and so forth. Slight divergence here. Was last week's show about what is atheism?
Common myths, right?
We discussed common myths about atheism.
And we did end up talking about this a little bit, but yeah.
But the thing about a lot of the recitations are ignoring historical realities of why science has come up with the answers.
Yeah.
250, 300 years ago, we didn't have the information we have now.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
So we had explanations or possible explanations for certain things, but we didn't have any evidence. Many of the leading physicists and so forth, before the discovery of radioactivity and fusion and fission and so forth, wouldn't accept the Darwinian's explanation for natural explanation, natural selection for the diversity of life, because they couldn't figure out how such a time scale would have happened.
Right, that information wasn't available to them. Yeah.
Yeah. When they found that out, many of them just pulled their objections out completely, stating, yes, we now have an explanation now of
that is true. As soon as the word got out, it's like, oh, man, that's really interesting.
Well,
that changed my mind.
You know, there were all kinds of estimates made for what the age of the Earth was, and the best physicist of his time in the late 1800s there was Lord Kelvin, and he made various estimates between 20 and 90 million years. And Darwin considered that, and he thought, well, maybe his science was wrong because that didn't seem to him to be enough time.
Right.
But then later, when radioactivity was discovered and they realized that there was an intrinsic heat source inside the Earth, not just the sun,
right,
and that would made the Earth much older than what Calvin had calculated, then Darwin was vindicated.
Yeah.
On that
How much more
basis.
powerful of a tool of science do you need at that point? You've got two scientific theories converging, and while they're converging on discrepant values, turns out one of them was wrong.
Well,
well, slightly wrong.
Yeah,
but
that's the way science works.
That's how science
right?
works.
It tries. Science doesn't just directly go to the heart of the thing and prove something true. Science nibbles around the edge till it finds out what are the most probable explanations for certain phenomena, and then gradually converges on something that looks like what we call truth. In other words, something that is the most probable explanation.
Yep.
So,
did you have anything else for us, Charles?
No, I just thought I'd call in and say hello. I've been busy for a while.
okay.
I did catch your shows on YouTube, so.
Okay,
right.
well, glad you called in, Charles. We'll be looking for you again in the future.
Yep. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's brings up a good point, and even the Catholic Church, and as we all know, many of the religions, most of the religious people in America, at least the religions they pick and seem to be coming from, have already accepted that young Earth creationism is not working.
Right.
This is an old Earth, and I got to give a little bit of credit there, although I don't like to give too much, because it took until 1992 for the Church to apologize to Galileo.
Yes.
I mean,
they did take their time.
it's
right?
not on the top of their list correcting mistakes, but you know what? It was slightly on. It was on some list somewhere, and it finally came up.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can move on to episode 2 before we get into our mid-show break. I'd like to quote from Answers in Genesis here regarding the name of the episode was Some of the Things That Molecules Do. And Tyson goes into an explanation of both natural and artificial selection. He uses polar bears as natural selection and dog breeds as artificial selection. So we have polar bears, or bears, I'm sorry. And it looks like we got a call. Might as well take that.
We'll take another call.
Hey, caller, could we have a name or a nickname for you?
Dale.
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 Okay. Hey, how you doing, Dale? You got a question or comment for us?
Oh, I got a comment. Wanted to comment on your fine job of defending Cosmos.
Okay.
I believe in the sciences, and I go along with it took quite a while. What they say about 14 billion years to create the universe as we know it.
Okay.
Like that. And many people, seem to think that maybe the Earth was created like 6 days. I'm not bothered by them, because you don't need to be disturbed by someone who seems to be incapable of processing a rational thought.
Okay. I will. Let me stop you there for a little bit, and we'll talk about that. We mentioned in our news that the UK banned the teaching of creationism in their schools. We gave some definitions for that. The reason that they had to do that was because of what some people were putting, not what they wanted to put, but what they've managed to put into schools, and it's occurring here in America. Many teachers, particularly in the Bible Belt, are scared to teach evolution in their biology classes in elementary school, middle school. High school, they get a little more confident, but they know there's going to be a problem as soon as they say it. Someone's going to have an issue with their religious background or something of that variety. And I agree with you. It was really hard for me to understand how this was a problem, because man, if they can't get it, whatever, right?
Right.
But do you see how this might be a little bit more important as a social problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems that religion permeates our society and our politics, our culture, and it's really difficult to make any kind of progress in the means of scientific invention or scientific discoveries or anything, because they always seem to want to block that. I'm not exactly sure why. I think maybe too many of them are making too much money off of religion, and so it would be a shame, if it was discovered to be a hoax or a myth or anything.
Well, I think that might be partially true, at least for the televangelist. But I think that, personally, I think that the people on Answers in Genesis that I'm reading these criticisms from, Ken Ham, I think they really believe this stuff. I think they're genuine and honest, and I think there's a problem in their thinking. I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, I think they do believe. The trouble is that they have no real justification for it. I was surprised. I was a little apprehensive when I learned that Bill Nye was going to debate Ken Ham, because I had never run into Ken Ham before, except by name somewhere. And some of these creationists are very slick debaters, like Dwayne Gish, who's now retired, I think.
Yeah, he was a little bit
maybe
better.
did.
Yeah.
But they were very slick debaters, and I thought, it's not that they have the real scientific backing, but what they have is that debating technique, which they can impress upon people. And so when I watched Ham in this debate, I was a little surprised. I thought he was very primitive. His only argument was that sciences are divided into two classes: operational sciences, which we have now, we can go into the lab, we can do some tests, etc., and historical sciences like archaeology or paleontology. And his argument is, well, we don't really know what happened in the past. We don't know if things work the same as they do in the past, and nobody there was in the past to see it except one person, and that was God. And he told everybody how to write it down, and so that's the truth. So I mean, that's such complete nonsense. I don't know how anybody can even buy that. I don't know how Ham himself can even buy into that. So,
yeah, I think in terms of, I liked your thought of, they're making a lot of money, but let's not look at it that way. Let's look at it as a different form of currency. They have a currency of a society. They've got a culture. They've got a framework for life. How do we marry? Who do I love? How do I treat my government? And do I support my country? And these are all things that are in religion, particularly Christianity. And the problem that these creationists have is clearly not the same problem a moderate Christian has. They are unable to let go of certain ideas because they think letting go of those ideas destroys their entire book. Now, I kind of want to agree that it hurts a lot of their book. If Genesis is not a factual, literal truth, then it hurts a lot of things. I think it destroys original sin and the whole reason Jesus would have to...
This is the whole point.
But a Catholic would disagree.
No, well, see, if you really think about it, and Ham makes this argument, which I made for years, but then I suddenly realized that he was buying the same thing, and that is, if evolution is true, then human beings are the result of a long progression of hominids that that developed into modern humans. There's no Adam and Eve.
Right.
And if there's no Adam and Eve, there is no original sin. No fall from grace. And if there's no original sin or fall from grace, then why do you need a redeemer? Yeah. You don't.
But let me tell you, this is where I want to latch on and I want to get slightly on the same side of the bed with him. Yeah. When you look at the fall of man, I don't think man is this doomed to... I'm sorry, go ahead, Dale. Oh, I think he was just saying goodbye because we started trailing off.
Sorry about that. We got kind of wound up here because of the points that you raised.
There's a good point.
Brought up some good points for us here, and we just got a little carried away. But be happy to have you call back in. I think now we're going to take a little bit of a break here.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We'll get back to it.
And play some little promotional work from our sponsors.
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalist of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Back. Yeah, so here we are again, continuing with our Defense of the Cosmos series. So what's next up?
Well, I was talking about episode 2 right before that last caller called in, and just to describe again, episode 2, Neil deGrasse Tyson is making or just giving a background information of types of evolution, or how evolution comes about via natural selection, artificial selection. And these are things that even our young earth creationists and such tend to agree on. I can breed a dog. Artificial selection, natural selection. Bears that hang out near ice caps are better camouflaged with white fur, and over time a little mutation or whatever can fix that, and that becomes dominant. We have evolution there. And then, of course, we extend that because we know that those mutations are precisely the same mutations that lead to various species over time. Of course, it takes a whole lot more time, right? And Anderson Genesis they quoted here, and it's, I just want to pick on this quote here. And this is, "This ploy, using that which is observable to make a case for that which has never been observed, fools many who fail to see its logical flaws. Far from promoting an understanding of the scientific method, this episode of Cosmos is best described as an infomercial for biological evolution." And what they're saying there is that, go ahead.
They're saying the same thing that I just said now, that this is the only argument they have. We have operational sciences where people can go in the laboratory, do experiments, repeat experiments, etc. And historical sciences where you have to rely on information that's contained in rock formations or in the genome of certain organisms, etc. And they don't believe that you can
make observations
anything from this. I should point out that some of the most successful programs on television are NCIS, CIS and its spin-offs, Bones, and originally Quincy. And what did all of these have? They had forensic scientists who find a corpse or some sort of foul play somewhere and spend all their time in the 1 hour they have reconstructing what happened in the past from
even though there was no one there.
And they must be pretty popular with the audience. And they're pretty popular with the audience because they had certainly a lot of viewers.
That is excellent, because you've got a crime scene, and sometimes there were people there, right? But who did we listen to? Do we listen to the forensic evidence, or do we listen to the eyewitness? That eyewitness got chucked out, man. We followed the evidence and found out, oh, they were lying, or oh, they weren't really there. You know,
or if you had 3 eyewitnesses,
or they were
three
just
different stories.
And I just, that's not a trick. That's reason. That's rational thinking.
That's quite rational.
And all right, so but that, honestly, that's all that Answers in Genesis had for that one, because that show dealt with what molecules do, and it went into evolution. And of course they kind of left that, and then from there we're gonna move on straight, might as well move on straight to episode 3, but it looks like we got us another caller. Let's take the call. Hello, caller, you're live. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
Yeah, this is Al.
Oh, hey, Al.
Yeah, you're talking about evolution?
Yeah, we just talked about the second episode of Cosmos, and...
Yeah. Did you know that Charles Darwin on his deathbed recanted on that?
Oh, he did? What did he say?
He said this, Lady Hope was there, and he said, "How I wish I had not expressed my theory of evolution as I have done."
Right.
He went on to say that he would like her to gather a congregation since he would like to speak to them about Jesus Christ and his salvation.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Put in the Boston Watchman newspaper.
Hey, okay, fine. I'm just going to, just for fun of it, and sincerely, just assume that you're correct. Okay?
No.
And now I have a question for you.
Sure.
What does all the evidence that he gathered from the Galapagos say, even if he had recanted?
It doesn't say a thing.
Why not?
What does it say?
Well, it says that pigeons' beaks on different islands of the Galapagos had been slowly moved and changed over time by evolution to eat and break the seeds of each individual
God
island.
To make that to happen.
Yeah.
Why would he? Why would he?
Well, probably to confuse people like you.
Oh,
So-
now see, that's the one thing I really
You see,
find
if God said-
pretty annoying. That
No,
your
listen.
God is a trickster. He's
Yeah.
a
If
trickster.
God, well, look, remember what happened with Pharaoh?
Hang on. Let's stay with Darwin. Let's stay with Darwin.
Right.
Let's stay with the claim, all right? What you're about to tell me, you didn't really mean that.
I'm going to tell
Al,
you
hang
this.
on.
I'm
Al,
gonna tell you this.
Al,
That-
you know the rules. Come on, Al. Don't make me do it. Hang on. Slow down, all right? You didn't mean that to me. What you meant was that microevolution is possible and that small changes within species occur, right?
Sure they do.
Okay. So let me ask you
So
this.
God didn't have to do it, though.
Yeah, why? So God didn't have to
If
do that.
microevolution is valid, then God didn't have to do it. Why'd you bring that up?
God would put bones in places for people like you to find to try to...
Okay, Al, we just talked about the tricks, man. I got to let you go. Look, I'm all about having a good conversation with you, and I recognize there's a folk tale, as someone has euphemistically called the story that you're trying to tell us. You know, but if you want to stay on and have a reasonable conversation, we can do that. Let's not do the trickster routine anymore.
Okay, but he recanted on his deathbed.
Okay, even if that is true, and it's not,
And it is.
okay, fine.
it's not.
Fine, Al, whatever. My point is that it wouldn't matter that he changed his mind. The evidence speaks for itself.
He was sorry he even started with it, he said.
Do you understand that deathbed confessionals and all that mean nothing to empiricism?
Usually it means a whole lot in a testimonial.
Yeah, we just talked about how eyewitness testimony, first-hand testimony, is terrible, terrible, terrible.
Well, his daughter Henrietta was there, and Lady Hope.
And none of them ever wrote down anything that said that, except if they made it up.
Yeah.
I don't know what
They didn't
Darwin
make it up
said.
because
on his
every
deathbed.
testimonial-
How do you know
Al-
they didn't make it up?
Al, I want to thank you for calling.
You weren't.
Sorry that he had started
You-
that because it wasn't true.
Well, I'm sorry that you brought this up, but you
He brought it
weren't.
up as a theory. He says, I started a theory that wasn't
you
true.
weren't there. You weren't there.
Okay, Al.
And you weren't there when God created the earth.
Hang on. Let's try to stick with Al's point briefly before we move on. Al, so the ideas that Darwin developed, the theories and the evidences that he brought to everyone's attention, have eventually led to everything we have today in medicine. Basically, our entire knowledge of the human genome and various other genomes. What are you saying about all of that information when you're telling me about Darwin's death confessional?
I'm saying that God gives man enough intelligence to be able to sort of create things, but you cannot create anything without something God has already created. You can't.
Like what?
I'm sorry.
Well,
I don't,
you can't build a table right in front of you without getting some wood. You'd have to get it from a tree that God created.
God didn't create trees. I tell you how trees are created. I take a seed and I put it in the ground, and that tree grows.
Wait, now didn't some of the elements that the United States had made in a lab via, I guess,
You mean artificial?
Right.
elements?
The artificial elements. I mean, were these present naturally in any
No.
other? So,
No.
well, hang on. We've got an artificial element that we've created in a lab. What about those?
No, you could have proved that to me. You could have made something appear. Just make it appear.
Okay, we've moved on to another topic. Al, I really do appreciate your call, and thank you for calling in.
You can't do it.
Yeah. Can't do what?
You can't make anything unless you use something that God has already made.
Hang on.
But God didn't make anything. So how can I use anything God made?
What did God make?
God created the entire earth.
When? How?
Oh no, God did not create the earth. The earth.
BC on November 28th.
Hang on. He's not joking. He's said this time before.
And I proved it by the population.
No, actually, no. You gave us an argument via population, and Joe actually knows where the argument comes
from. The
from.
meteorite dust that we collect on the earth every year as we go through space, we'd be in 200 feet of earth.
It's not true.
That's not true. It's not true. That's an old fairy story that people made up about.
We've got this wonderful atmosphere. We've got things on the earth that prevent these contaminants from coming in that fashion. They do enter the earth, but they're not going to bury us. There's all sorts of great. There's weather. Al, I'm going to let you go, but thank you.
I think we have to move on here
a
bit today.
Really, that was a fun conversation, and Al,
I enjoyed it.
thanks for not preaching at me. You did a good job.
Okay.
Al held up his end of the bargain. All right, so let's move on into episode 3, titled "When Knowledge Conquered Fear," and. Oh man, this is my favorite one. This is a quote I quoted you before the show. Okay, so this is Answers in Genesis again. They've got a whole, I'm just responding to a lot of their claims. All right, if you want to look it up, you can. Cosmos, a space-time odyssey, spends much of episode 3 painting biblical Christianity with the same brush as false religions and superstitions. That's about right. I mean, if I'm going to talk about a religion...
I could probably go along with that.
Now, keep in mind, Cosmos didn't go straight up, open up with, oh, here's a false religion.
Oh, yeah, right.
Neil deGrasse Tyson gave it the credit that every religion deserves, that these are people, this is what Joe and I have been talking about for almost 2 months now, people trying to live, communities, society, the birthplace of it. We're coming together. Well, I wouldn't say that because apes have society, but... human society. These are people with ideas as a framework for life. And they made some good ideas and bad ideas. And now I'm not going to judge them necessarily by today's standards, but I'm going to judge their science by today's standards. And their science was non-existent and basically didn't do a lot to help us.
Sure. I mean, people make up stories to explain things. They do it all the time. We do it ourselves. But it's just that 3,000 years ago, people didn't understand very much of how nature works at all. The original gods were gods of nature, gods of the wind, gods of the seas, gods of thunder, lightning, what have you.
The life and death phases, the birth cycles, changing of seasons. I mean, these were all...
And so the default position, if you couldn't understand really why this happened, was that there were gods who were in charge of this.
And that's, I think for them it's perfectly rational. It's fine, but
Yeah, but we're 3,000 years later.
Right, it's time to...
And we've learned a lot. I mean, from my point of view, religion has never made any contribution to knowledge. It's made stories. It's made ideas that people could live with and maybe design their lives on, but it's never made any contribution to knowledge.
Not on a specific,
and
religious people have,
religious
of course.
People have.
But they used their ideas. They didn't come from the book. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this Isaac Newton was a very religious man. Okay. Some people consider he may have been the greatest scientist ever, and of course he invented developed the theory of universal gravitational attraction. He invented the calculus. He did a lot of work on light, etc. But he was a very religious person, and in fact, right up to the end of his life, he was delving in alchemy trying to make gold out of lead.
Yeah, but he didn't know what was going on inside, like that deep down.
Right.
And
so the point is that I find that in a lot of the religious literature, people quote to great scientists who were theists. Mm-hmm. And inevitably they'll go back to a time when it was perfectly legitimate to believe that there was God somewhere because you didn't understand something, and that God was what the motivating force.
Mm-hmm. This is the beginning of the God of the Gaps argument, really. And we insert it now, except when I insert it, I choose not to insert a God. I just insert I don't know.
Yeah.
So if I don't know the answer, I just shrug my shoulders. I'm not too smart. I don't know. So.
Yeah. I think most of us can live with uncertainty. We don't have to definitely think that there is some mechanism or mechanizer out there that is creating a situation that we don't understand. So we just say we don't understand it for the present.
Tyson opens up with a metaphor in this series. And he says, the baby in the basket is ready to walk and to know the cosmos. And quoted directly from Answers in Genesis, they call this his opening metaphor and say it ties scientific progress to the notion that science has shown God to be a superfluous invention, a first cause we no longer need to explain our origins and our significance. And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, that's really good. Usually when I read someone else critiquing and they quote something and they read it back, I don't agree with their analysis. Yeah. I think that is precisely what Cosmos was saying in that episode. And but then they went on to say something really interesting to me that caught my attention. Then the episode ventures into the imaginary realm of the Oort cloud. Now, for those of you at home, we were talking about Newton, and that immediately pulled me back to episode 3 because you got Newton, Halley, and some other people in this episode, and we're talking about Halley's comet, right? Mm-hmm. Comets, we know, they come out at the sun in very elliptical orbits, exaggerated elliptical orbits, and they grow these big old tails. And what's happening there is the sun is boiling off this extra material. Things are happening. And they have less mass every time they get near than they did the previous time. And so they're affected by objects in the solar system, and in fact, even outside of the solar system, and passing stars at that point can really grab them. And so they're short-lived. And so Answers in Genesis would say, if there's so many of these things, or after 14 billion years, none of them would exist anymore. There'd be no Oort cloud.
I've heard that argument.
Yeah, so the Oort cloud, for those of you know, would be the source, or the hypothesized source. We don't have objective or observable data from the Oort cloud that I know of. This is just a hypothesis. This is one of those early, beginnings of science.
Right. Well, there's a lot of stuff out there in space, out beyond the solar system, and we know that there are perturbations on those. And every once in a while, one of those comes flying into our solar system, and if it's a comet, which is sort of a big ice ball, and you're right, the sun heats it up, it boils off some of the molecules, makes a tail. The tail always is pushed away from the sun, no matter where the comet is, because of the solar radiation pressure. And so we understand comets. I mean, that argument that there wouldn't be any left if the Earth were the solar system were as old as we say it is, that's a nonsense.
And they're saying that because of we say it's an old Earth or old universe at that point. But and it's funny that the calculation on that page was the 14 billion years, which would, the Earth is 5 billion hereabouts. Yeah. How old's the solar system and our suns? I mean, it's I don't know, but it's not 14 billion. And
what? The solar system? The
solar system.
Yeah, it's
well, it'd be really close.
The same age, for the age of the Earth,
right.
4.57 billion years.
Yeah. But interesting to me is then they got back to, when they say we have a first cause that we no longer need, We don't need that first cause anymore to explain. This is what Darwin brought for those late natural philosophers that were struggling with these ideas. When Darwin gave us a framework to understand where we came from, where other life came from, and then we can start to wonder about where the rest of life came from. I'm talking about chemical beginnings, abiogenesis. Yeah. We didn't need an Adam and Eve anymore. And in fact, we started over time, and now it's a silly story. And at best, you might give it some metaphorical importance.
Well, we certainly don't need an Adam and Eve. I mean,
I don't like the story.
There's still the question, you know, of how did life originate?
Yes.
And that's not a solved question. I mean, people work on it, and they work on it hard. And I will admit that I'm a little disappointed that that problem hasn't been solved.
Right.
And nevertheless, if you can find room to squeeze a God in there to make that first little prokaryotic organism, you know, somewhere on Earth.
And that's what Al just did. He's like, well, where did it come? He wants to know where everything comes from. Those of you at home that don't know, Al calls in, he wants to know this first cause. He wants to know what that is. And where I'm saying, I'm okay to say I don't know. He's okay to say it is precisely this date. I mean, you heard it was something...
32 BC, is that what he said? What?
It comes to like 6,400 years ago or something like that. Anyways, it's a very precise date, and I would like to know the processes, but he never tells me how. He says generations, and it's an interesting and fun conversation, but it's devoid of science.
Yeah, well, it gives our viewers something to think about.
But one other thing I wanted to comment on about that Oort cloud. Oh wow, I'm realizing the time's really ticking down. So I guess that's going to finish us out. But is why didn't they criticize the ideas, the scientific reasoning that brought us to hypothesize an Oort cloud? Why instead do they pick on the existence of the Oort cloud? And the reason I say that is because science tells you that that is a hypothesized. We would be surprised if we didn't find an Oort cloud, but also we would be not surprised. I hate to use all the negatives. If it wasn't there, what we would not be surprised to find is a reason that comets come into existence into our solar system over and over.
Look, we know that there are all kinds of asteroids and things out there, right? I mean, NASA keeps tabs now on all the large asteroids.
Anything we can tag, yep.
Yeah, right, that might cause a disaster on Earth if we had a collision. So space out there isn't just all empty. I mean,
exactly.
Within the solar system, it's full of all this rocky material and or all these frozen gases, which were there when the solar system was formed. So I think that we don't have a real problem with understanding why these things are there. I mean, we don't know everything about the formation of planets, how they come about, but boy, there's a lot of good science out there that has looked into this and has good models for it. So I think that this is not something that really should be an question of not knowing at all. I think we're in good shape.
Right. All right, well, it's closing up. About a minute to go.
Yeah, so I guess what we ought to do is start thinking about, we have a program next week, the subject?
Oh yeah, Joe and I think we're going to be on. We may go back to Cosmos, we may not.
Okay.
But it'll be a religious argument.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be something about religion.
Okay.
More. Yeah.
So it's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper.
This has been a Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
So please send us your feedback. You can leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m.
Okay, and remember, we're meeting up at Barley's after the show here. We usually have a good group of maybe 25 or 30 people down there. And no matter which side of the debate you're on, drop in and have some good conversation. So our thanks to Sam and Jonas for technical help and to the staff at CTV Knox.